Alright guys, welcome back for part 4 of the Tlr 8Ight-T 4.0 Nitro Truggy build series. And as you can see, if you've been following along, I'm up to step E1. Finally building the shocks. So everything's been coming along quite nicely. Had a few hiccups along the way, but we had to improvise and make it happen. You know the motto. So far, part 1 was the front end assembly and the front diff. Part 2 was the center differential and assembly and install. And part 3, what you just watched, the previous video, was the rear differential and assembly and install. And I've been waiting to build these shocks, and we're one step closer to getting this all done. So as you can see, I have each one of the shocks laid out here on my Cow RC pit mats. Definitely coming in handy here. And we have some differences between the front shocks and the rear shocks. As you can see, the front shock bodies are slightly smaller than the rears. So I've carefully laid everything out here. All the parts have been laid out. These are the rears, these are the fronts. And I am going to be going with the suggested shock oils that they suggest in the vehicle. So this is set up for a race track environment, and it's set up a little bit differently than what I'm used to. Usually in my basher vehicles, I'll set the same shock weight in all 4 shocks, but I'm going to be going with what they suggest in the book, and if I do need to change it up, I will. And they're suggesting a 37.5 weight in the front and a 32.5 weight in the rear. So it's kind of interesting that you're putting a heavier shock weight oil in the front shocks and a lighter in the rear, but that makes a lot of sense for a racetrack environment. And you do want to have a little bit more dampening in the rear so that when you do rev the engine, it will put the power to the rear wheels. So I have a few friends that have built this kit, and they went with the with the stock shock oils, and they've had great success. So I figured, why change it up? I've seen it first person work, so I'm going to be going with what they suggest in the kit. So as you can see, they have 14-step instructions here to build the shocks themselves, and there are a few different methods of doing this. I'm going to share my method of doing it, but as you can see, they are being a little bit specific here. The front shock pistons are going to be the 1.3 millimeter pistons, so I have them set up right here. Those are the 1.3 millimeter, and the rears are going to get the split 1.2 millimeter and 1.3 millimeter pistons, which I have right there set up. Obviously they're going to be getting the longer shock shafts. The fronts are going to be getting the shorter shock shafts. And they do have an optional bladder. So for your shock caps, they do have, which is a very nice feature, a bleeder hole on the shock cap, as you can see right there. Focus, yep. And they will be getting sealed with this micro screw right here and washer. But they give you a choice of either using what I'm used to, shock bladders right here, which will go in the shock cap, or they have these type of bladders that have a hole in the middle that allow you to bleed the shock through the shock cap right here. I've seen a few different methods of doing this, but I'm going to be going with a traditional shock bladder. I just feel that I'm more accustomed to building shocks that way, and I'm going to be building them that way. So that's what I'll be doing for this step. Alright, and I do have something I'm going to show you. You guys are probably going to be laughing at this, but I don't have an official shock stand or a shock assembly stand, so you're going to want an area to lay your shocks once you fill them with your shock oil. And my kids have the Nintendo Switch, and I was looking for something that I could build a shock stand out of, and this is a quick and easy way to do it. This is pretty stable, even though it's made out of cardboard. I do have some plywood. I was gonna get my hole saws out and make it, but I figured, why not do something real quick and easy? So I know most of you are probably laughing at this, but it'll serve the purpose, and as a matter of fact, I'm just gonna keep this around for when I build all my other shocks. So yeah, so I'm gonna get these all assembled and I'm gonna fill them with the fluid, and then I'll show you where we're gonna go from there. Okay guys, as you can see, I already have 3 of the shocks already assembled and filled, but I'll do the last one here on camera for you guys. So as you can see, I'm setting up my bleeder cap screw, and you want to put a little dab of Loctite on it. Keep that in place. Since I will not be using the optional O-ring, I'm going to be using the traditional shock cap bladder. I will be installing this all the way and tightening it all the way. You want to get it just snug, not over tight. And here is the shock bladder that I will be using. You want to apply some shock fluid to it, just help lube it up a little bit. It'll make the installation a lot easier, and you're going to install it into the shock cap itself. You can use a little bit of a tool here just to assist get it into the groove. Get that all set up. And now you're going to take your O-ring for your preload adjustment, and this gets an O-ring installed into it. You want to lube that up as well. Get that installed. And now for the shock shaft itself. They're suggesting that you use a metal washer for the base. You're going to install your piston. With a washer on your set screw with a little bit of Loctite. Get that installed. And to assist, I'm going to use my Techno RC shock shaft tool to hold it in place, and then I will be able to tighten that set screw nice and snug, not over tight, just nice and snug. Now for the shock body itself. First, you're going to want to take your black rubber O-ring with some silicone fluid, and that'll help you slide it over the threads on the base of the shock body, like so. And there are 2 rubber seals that go in here. So you're going to start with the first rubber seal, and you're going to lube it with some silicone shock fluid. Use an implement to push it down all the way. Then you're going to take your plastic spacer, seat that properly, and then your second rubber seal. Put some silicone fluid on there as well. Get that nice and seated. And then your last plastic insert. And I like to put a little bit of blue Loctite on the base of the shock body, just so it will not come unthreaded from the shock body. Just a little preventative maintenance. Barely any, just a little dab on the threads. And this you can tighten by hand and make sure it seats well around that O-ring. And now you're ready to install your shock shaft. You want to make sure you lube this up really good. Don't be shy with the lubricant, with the shock fluid. And you're going to want to get it right into the hole there. And you want to lube this up nice because you don't want the threads of the end of the shock shaft to compromise those rubber seals. Now once you have the shock shaft installed, you're going to want to install your shock end. In the kit, they don't specify how far you need to tighten the shock end, but I simply tightened mine until it was threaded all the way in, nice and snug. I didn't over tighten it. And my Techno RC shock shaft tool worked perfect. And as you can see, you can compare it against the other one to make sure that the pistons are coming up to the same amount. And now I like to add a little bit of silicone fluid to the actual threads, because your preload adjustment has that rubber O-ring in there, and you're going to want to thread it onto the shock body, and that silicone fluid just helps a little bit so that you don't tear that rubber O-ring. Use your shock tool that's supplied with the kit to thread that all the way on. Okay, now it's time to actually fill the shock bodies. So with the piston in the lowest position, you want to fill the shock body almost to the top, not all the way, about 3/4 of the way to the top. And now you want to raise the piston to the top to allow a lot of that air that's trapped underneath the piston to escape, and you'll see the air bubbles rising to the top. Do that a few times and you'll see those air bubbles rise to the top, and now you can fill it the rest of the way. I like to fill it just about flush with the top of the shock body, and when I raise the piston to the highest position, you'll see the shock fluid just about want to pour out of the shock body, and that's completely normal. When you raise it all the way up to the top, it'll actually create a bubble just past the height of the shock body, and that way you know you have enough fluid inside the shock body. Now you're going to want to pump it up and down anywhere from 7 to 8 to maybe 10 times just to release all those air bubbles from inside the shock body and from underneath the piston, and to ensure that you have smooth movement of your shock shaft. Set it in your shock stand to release all the air bubbles. Let them sit for about 10 minutes. Repeat. Do the same procedure for all 4 shocks. Okay, while I'm waiting for the air bubbles to release from my shock fluid, I went ahead and installed some shock covers for my shock springs. And these are made by a company called Dusty Motors, and they will fit a wide range of shocks from a 1/16 scale to a 1/8 scale, because they are made from a spandex type material, and this is how you'll receive it. It comes in a long length of material, and you'll basically cut it to size. And I'm a big fan of this because it definitely helps keep a lot of dust out of your shock shafts. And Dusty Motors makes many products that keep your RC vehicle free from a lot of dust and debris. So to install it, you'll cut your length of material and you'll basically thread it right onto your shock spring like so, and you'll just keep on threading it till you get to the top of the shock spring, doing it as evenly as possible. And then once I get to the end, I'll just stretch it over the last few coils of the shock. And if you've never heard of Dusty Motors, definitely go and check them out. They make a lot of products for your RCs and they really come in handy. I'm a big fan of them. And that's how it'll look. And then you push in the excess into the ends of the shock spring and you're good to go. Okay, I've let my shock shaft sit with the fluid for about 5 to 10 minutes, and you can see that there are no more air bubbles. They've all been released from the fluid, and that's how you want it to look. So let's move on to the final installation of the shock caps. So I'm going to show you how I go ahead and do this. And you want to be very careful at this point. And what you want to do is set your rebound, and your rebound is how much the shock shaft will be pushed out after being fully contracted. And for a general base setting, and for this application, I'm going to set the rebound at halfway. So you want to set your rebound and hold it at your desired setting while you thread the shock cap on. And you're going to want to hold the shock cap in place with the bleeder hole facing out and thread your shock body into the shock cap, holding the rebound setting at your desired position. So like I said, my rebound has been set about halfway. And you'll see the shock fluid get pushed out of the bleeder hole. And now you're going to want to use your shock tools and fully tighten the shock cap to the shock body, and it will push out all the excess fluid and fully tighten your shock cap. Okay, so I'm going to show you the rear shocks right now. As you can see, I set the rebound setting at about 3/4 of the length of the shock shaft. So after being fully contracted, you will see that the shock shafts come approximately to 3/4 of their full length, retracting very slowly at the same rate. I'm very happy with the quality of these shocks. They're very smooth. And the fronts I set a little bit past halfway rebound, so as you can see, they retract and rebound about the same rate, and that's exactly what you want. You want all 4 shocks to actuate at the same rate. Okay, now on to the shock shaft boots themselves. You're going to want to install some shock fluid to lubricate them very well, because this part can be a little bit difficult because you want to stretch that rubber over the end of your shock end, and you do not want to tear this rubber in any way. So you want it to be very well lubricated, and you want to take your time and you want to stretch it over that shock end. Don't be afraid, just go ahead and get it on there, and as long as it is well lubricated, it should stretch right over that shock end. Okay, after you get your shock shaft boots installed, it's time to install your pivot balls, and I found that this Techno RC pivot ball tool works excellent. So it was very satisfying to use this tool throughout the build so far, and it has really come in handy. Instead of using a pair of needle nose, you can see it has some insert on the handle there, and it allows you to push your pivot ball in effort free. It also has a part of the tool where it will help remove your pivot balls as well. But I'm using the installation part of the tool, and it worked phenomenally. Alright guys, almost ready to install the shocks on the truck. As you can see, I have the 4 assembled shocks. I have my 2 rears and my 2 fronts. I've installed my Dusty Motors shock covers on there. But just to backtrack real quick, completed step E1. There's a 14-step instructions, very self-explanatory. You're going to assemble your shocks as shown right here in the description. You're going to want to use thread locker where it says to use thread locker. I've installed the shock boot assembly. You're going to want to fill your shock boots with some oil to make it easier to slide over the shock end right there. I've installed my pivot balls into the shock ends. And I went the extra step. Now these shock boots definitely help dust and debris from getting on your shock shaft, and as it goes in and out, as the piston goes in and out of the shock body, it'll keep some dirt and debris from going inside your fluid there. I went the extra step and installed my Dusty Motors covers, so now I have double protection, and I'm really excited because now we are up to step E3, which is the front shock installation, and step 4, the rear shock installation. I'm going to set up all the angles right here as they show. On the front, it's going to be 115 millimeter from hole to hole, and the rear is going to be 128 millimeter from hole to hole. And finally, it will be the final complete shock assembly installation. So let me get all this completed and I'll show you the finished product. I am so excited for this. Alright guys, shock installation has been completed. Wow, what do you guys think? Wow, what a big difference. Looking good, looking good. So we're at step E6, complete shock assembly. Check it out. You guys think? Looking good. Starting to look like a Truggy now, right? They got our suspension installed. Wow, I'm super happy with this. So, just going back real quick, step E5. I set my droop setting at 115 for the front. 115 millimeters in the front and 128 millimeters in the back, and you'll set that by your droop screw right there. You'll adjust that, and you can't see it, the droop screw comes out at the end, at the bottom of the A-arm, comes down on the fin on the chassis right there, the ear on the chassis, you can see in the front right there as well. That's your droop screw setting. A lot of Truggies racing platforms have that if you've never seen that before. And yeah, so I have a little bit of a treat for you guys. I know this was a little bit of a long video, but we're moving forward in the build series. And I don't normally do this, but for you guys today I will. For those of you that have made it to the end of the video, I'm going to fast forward to F1 and get the side skirts installed. The chassis guards installed. So I really want to just finish off this look, and since it's the following step, I might as well do it. So I already have them out of the bag, out of the F1 bag, and let's get them installed and see what it looks like. Alright guys, a little surprise here at the end. I decided to go forward and install the side chassis guards, which gives it a more complete look, and I had a set of old school Proline Badlands laying around for 1/8 scale monster trucks and Truggies, and I just figured I would throw it on there just to test out the shocks, test out the suspension. Everything is feeling really smooth, really nice. I will tell you that these shocks are top quality. I'm really impressed, and I just couldn't help myself. I just wanted to share this with you guys. Couldn't help to see what it was going to look like a little bit closer to the finished product. So wanted to show this to you guys. And yeah, so we're getting closer and closer here. Closer and closer. Still a little grindy with the with that gear mesh, but I'm hoping that once this thing starts getting broken in with the nitro engine and everything, I hope everything smooths out on it. So yeah, so as you can see, I finished up step E6, completed shock assembly, and I did fast forward over to F1 and install the chassis guards, and that's about it for right now. As you can see, F2, next video will be installing the servo brace and getting the servos installed. So that's gonna do it for today, guys. Part 4 of the Tlr 8Ight-T 4.0 Truggy build series has been completed. Stay tuned for part 5. We're going to get those servos installed. And I hope you guys are all making it happen in your RC worlds out there. And for now, this is Chris, the Everyday RC Guy in TLR land, saying thanks for watching.